Hello viewers, welcome to your favorite Mana TV program. Today we are going to discuss how to write an effective resume. Every educated individual needs to have a resume. In our career, resume plays a vital role. Before you go and enter the interview hall, your resume enters there. Show utmost interest and seriously prepare your resume. You cannot depend on TP operator to prepare your resume. You have to take utmost care while preparing a resume, and if possible and if necessary, take the help of some experts, some lecturers or anyone well versed with resume writing. And today we shall discuss all these issues in detail in this program. We are going to discuss what is a resume and what goes into resume and how to write it, and finally what are the various formats practiced in resume writing and what type of language should we use in a resume, and finally what care we must take to make our resume so effective. And today let us see what is a resume. Actually, the word resume comes from the French word résumé, which means to summarize. What to summarize? Actually, the Macmillan English Dictionary defines it as a summary of something. It also gives an example. I gave him a quick resume of events, and the pronunciation also we must be mindful of. Usually whenever you look at the spelling R-E-S-U-M-E, we tend to pronounce the word as resume. Friends, we must be very careful because this is not an English word, whereas this is a French word. Of course, there is an English word resume, which means to start, to restart your work. But actually this name resume is a French word which means to summarize something. And what are we going to summarize? Actually, we are going to summarize our qualifications, our experience if we have anything, and our skills, and whatever you want to present to your employer, we have to summarize all those things because we cannot present them in detail. And is it the only way of summarizing all our qualifications and everything? No, there are even other ways of summarizing our qualifications and skills. What are they? I look at the screen, and they are curriculum vitae. This is another non-English word. And what does it mean? Curriculum vitae is also means to summarize our life, but it is relatively longer and more detailed than resume. And usually for academic career we use curriculum vitae, and it is preferred outside USA. Usually in USA they prefer resume, and there is a tradition of using biodata forms among students, and we go to a bookstop and buy a form of biodata and we fill it up and we submit. But you know what happens? The employer will form an opinion about you because you are so careless about your job and about your future, because you are depending on a prepared biodata no way suitable for your requirement. So you need to be careful in choosing your format of summary, your qualification summary. If resume is asked, you prepare a resume. If CV is asked, you prepare a CV, and no one is going to ask for a biodata form, because that is no way describes all your qualifications. You need to pay utmost attention in this regard, my friends. And what does a resume do for you? When we can understand the importance of a resume, what it is going to do for you, then you can pay the required attention. See, it helps market your skills and experience. See, our today's society is called a consumer society, and we have to sell everything. and we have to sell our experience and skills also. They are marketable and they can fetch you what we can say great dividends and fruits for you, please. You are not an ordinary individual, you are an individual of great skills and lot of experience and lot of education. So, you can market your skills and experience. And then what does it say for you? It tells that you have goods and can deliver them. You know, employers need actually the people who have goods and have potential to deliver them. So, you can be one among them and your resume must say that. And then your resume must persuade the prospective employer. Persuade for what? It has to convince the employer to provide an interview, to arrange an interview for you. Yeah, definitely your resume is going to get an interview for you. So, resume is so powerful and you cannot neglect it, you cannot afford to neglect it. You should pay utmost attention while preparing your resume. Let us see how to prepare our resume. And one more thing, why do we need a resume at all? It is a self-assessment tool. It is not only for your job actually, it is also a type of self-assessment process. While preparing a resume, you know what happens? You assess yourself. What did I study? What were the courses that I have done? And in what way I am useful for my employer? What type of jobs can you get? And in one way or the other, you are going to assess your whole personality and you are going to make new goals for your future. If you do not have any goal while preparing a resume, definitely you are going to set a goal for your life, my friends. Then you cannot neglect preparing a resume. Then what is an effective resume? Of course, there are innumerable formats and anyone can prepare a resume, but it must be effective because everyone prepares a resume, then your resume must be effective to impress upon your employer. You know, good impressions, first impressions are the best impressions. That is why when you prepare a resume, it must create a good impression upon your employer. And what creates an impression? Your appearance and your content. The appearance of your resume, it attracts the attention of your employer, and its content, it convinces him to provide an interview for you. And then it also has to address the employer's needs. The employer has some specific needs, and while preparing a resume, you must keep in mind to address those needs. And it also has to show the employer that how he or she is going to benefit from you. Every prospective employee is a benefit to an employer because his firm is going to, the boundaries of the firm are going to be widened and he is going to enter new arenas. That is why you will be a benefit to your employer than a liability. And while preparing a resume, you have to be very clear and you also have to be very concise. You cannot describe lots of stories in your resume. There will not be lot of space to describe everything. That is why you need to be very concise and also to be very clear. And then organize for you the job search. It is going to organize a job search for you. Once your resume is at hand, you know what happens. You will search for a suitable job, and once you fix your goal and then resume is at hand, then you go in search of a job. And we have various formats, and there are some common rules that we must keep in mind while preparing a resume in a format. It is better to use A4 size white paper always, and let us try to confine ourselves to one page. If necessary, you can extend to the second page also, but always it is good to confine ourselves to one page. Resume should be confined to one page. Then use proper uniform margins, right side, left side, up and down margins must be uniform, and the ideal margin can be 1.5 inches. Okay. And then use all first letters, caps and headings of all headings must be in first letters of all headings must be in caps, and then all subheads and all headings must be highlighted. Then show entries by bullets. You will have different entries in each and every subhead. All entries must be shown by bullets. And then use preferably 12 font size of Times New Roman. We have a tendency of using many types of fonts, but it is good to use Times New Roman because it is used extensively all over the world, and 12 font is ideal. And as I told you earlier, do not use any fancy fonts. And we have also a tendency of using gaudy designs to make our resume very attractive. But you know what happens, if it is so gaudy, the employer may tend to throw it away. That is why do not use gaudy designs, try to be professional. Instead of using gaudy and being showy, you be professional and make it very formal. And I would like to make a note of this thing here. Sometimes resumes are sorted by appearance, and appearance shows your seriousness. And the way you design your the format of your resume and the time you have spent on this shows how serious you are about your resume. And then coming to the content part of your resume, well organize the content. You have so many ideas, you have a lot of information, but all that information must be organized. And then coming to language part, you also have to pay utmost care and attention towards your language. It must be very formal, and sometimes some typographical errors may creep into your resume. That is why you also have to pay utmost care to avoid any type of typographical errors. But the problem is this, how to write a resume at all? Many times to start with is the problem. And that is why do not get intimidated, do not get disappointed. You take a paper first of all and sit down, take a pen and start collecting your information, your certificates and whatever the course you have done. You try to recollect all that information and then do a mind dump. What does it mean? Mind dump is nothing but whatever comes into your mind, put it on paper, immediately put it on paper and jot down everything that comes to your mind, and do not leave any qualification or any information that comes into your mind regarding your qualifications or your educational career or your experience or anything else. You put it on paper first of all. Then there will be a big chaos because a whole lot of information is there on paper. Maybe you need to have 4 or 5 papers, sheets of paper, and then you have to make an order out of that chaos. How can you make it? You have to divide the whole information under various heads, which we are going to discuss very shortly. And once the information is on paper, it becomes your first rough draft. Then your job is simplified. Only thing is, the whole information you have kept on paper. The thing is that you have to categorize that information under various heads. What goes into a resume? What are different heads? Let us discuss. First one and the most important one is identifying information. What does it mean? Identifying information is nothing but your name and your mailing address, your phone number, your email, if you have some websites, and even that goes into your identifying information. And then comes the very important one, career objective. And of course, we have to discuss in detail this career objective. Of course, afterwards we will discuss. Third one is work experience. This is also very important one. Of course, the fresh students may not have work experience, but they do have different types of experience in various other areas. We also have to present that experience on our resume. And work experience has some responsibilities and you may have some accomplishments. All those things have to be included under this head called work experience. And then comes your volunteer experience. What is volunteer experience? You may get surprised. Sometimes we do a lot of service, social service, or some activity in our college, or some service which is not recognized even by you sometimes. Even that comes under this head. And then your education. After all, our education shows what we are, where you studied, what you studied, and what it is useful for. all these things. And what else? You will have some special skills and some special training. We have to include them also. We will discuss what they are in detail afterwards. And sometimes some people have military experience. In India, of course, it is not mandatory, but in some Western countries, it is mandatory for youth to work in military. And if you have anything like that, you can include even that military experience. And then professional affiliations. You may be a member of certain organizations, international organizations, and you have to include that even. Being a student, you might have won some awards and honors. It is good to include them in your resume. Finally, regarding references, of course, there is a debate on these references, including references. We will discuss in detail, but it is good to include references. Let us discuss identifying information. First one is full name, including your surname. And do not get confused, certain advertisement asks for your first name and last name, and you have to include your first name, last name, your surname, and also proper name. It is good to keep your full name in boldface. And then your contact address. You should be very careful while writing your contact address, because you have to maintain an order. First door number, and then your street, and then your area, and then your city or town, and then pin code, if necessary district, and then your state. Step by step process we have to go. And then your phone number. If you have a mobile number, if you have a mobile, you give mobile number, and if you have a landline, you give landline number. And each student must have his or her own email ID these days. It is very important, because without email ID these days you will be considered an outdated individual, because you need to have an email ID. We must go high tech these days, because that gives us an opportunity to be contacted by anybody else anywhere. And then comes your website. Some people do have their websites. If you have one, you can include, provided that is relevant to your job. Then objective. Here you have to pay special attention, my dear friends. Some people, some books, some experts say we need to have objective. Some experts say that your objective confines your opportunities, because if you say my objective is to become a manager, what about other jobs? That is why while writing an objective, you need to be very mindful, and it can be called career objective or job objective. Career objective is wide in scope, because you will have a goal in your life that may be achieved afterwards, but job objective is something which is aimed at your immediate goal or immediate job. That is why while writing an objective, you need to be very careful, and you have to keep in mind some do's and don'ts. Let me read out. You have to be very specific while writing a job objective, and let it be very short, because we may have a tendency of writing a very lengthy statement. You know what happens, while completing that lengthy statement, you may miss your own objective. That is why it is better to be short and concise. And you know, the Shakespearean, one of the famous Shakespearean characters says, brevity is the soul of wit. And if you are wise enough, try to be brief and short and concise. And let your objective be focused on your career goal. And finally, try to mention 2-3 personal qualities of your own, so that the employer, the prospective employer, may understand what you are and what you are going to achieve in your life. And here is one important point you must keep in mind. It is a don't. What is that? We like to use bombastic language and some cliches. We copy some format and we use the same thing in our resume. It is good to avoid all those things. No bombastic language and cliches. You know, cliches, words which are often used by all the people. We have to avoid them, because they may not suit you. Use the word which is suitable for you and for your job. And then educational qualifications. You can either say education or qualifications. And how to enlist them? you can put all of them in an order. You can list them in a reverse chronological order. What does it mean by reverse chronological order? You might have done your graduation in 2007 and your intermediate in 2005. So, what comes first? Your graduation comes first. So, in 2007 you completed your graduation, that is the latest one that comes first, and then goes in an order backwards. And you can also say the most recent one comes first. And do not forget to include every qualification that you have, but keep in mind you need not go back to your first class. Unless you study your lower classes, you cannot come to graduation. Graduation is very important, and if you have done some other courses, you also include them simultaneously. And if necessary, include core subjects and project works you have done. Why? Sometimes your core subjects may attract the attention of your employer, prospective employer, and your project work it may be useful in the firm that you are going to enter. That is why it is good to include them if necessary, if you find them useful in your job. And then comes courses which you are doing presently, you are studying presently. The usual practice is if you are studying, let us say post graduation, let us say MA, people put MA within brackets, what we call parenthesis. Do not do that. You write MA and within parenthesis you say you are going to complete the course in so and so year. Let us say do not put the course in parenthesis, but put the date in parenthesis. Parenthesis means brackets, and then include name of the course, institution, date, and percentage or grade. Some people have this grade point average. If you have a grade point average, it is good to include even the scale, because we do not know on what scale you got this so and so grade. That is why it is good to include even scale. And other qualifications, other than your educational qualifications, you might have done some professional courses, some technical courses. It is good to include all of them. It includes your professional training and some certificate courses, some add-on courses like communication skills course, which you have done, most of the students have done very recently on Mana TV, and some technical trainings. Some people might have undergone training in let us say DTP operation, some people might have undergone training in typewriting, and so on and so forth. Then coming to work experience, even in work experience your latest experience comes first. For example, you completed, maybe you left one job in 2006, another job in 2000. So, 2006, a job which you left in 2006, it comes first, and then comes 2000, maybe 98, etc., etc. It goes back like that. Include the ones relevant to the job. You might have done many jobs, but all those jobs are not very important. You have to include the job which is relevant to the job which you are aspiring for. Then include the job title, name of the firm or organization, and place and days, from which date to which date you were there in that particular job. And one more very, very important thing, in that job you might have done so many great things. To explain all those great things, you have to use some strong action words. Here I have a list for you, please. Students, you can have a list of, have a look at the list. And here we have an extensive list, but it is not easy to read all these words, because here we have an extensive list. I hope all these words are available in books and even in internet. Finally, at the end of our lecture, I am going to give a list of websites and books. You can refer those books and browse through the internet. And let me move on. Work experience. You have many responsibilities. You have to give a brief description of your responsibilities and major functions or duties that you had in that job. And then some responsibilities may attract the attention of your employer. You have to highlight them, you have to specify them. And then in your former job you might have had some accomplishments, maybe you have excelled among all your colleagues, and then state them in specific terms. What did you do there and what were the results? All entries in a resume must be result oriented, they must be quantified by your achievements or by your results. Coming to voluntary experience, in the beginning I introduced this expression, this topic, voluntary experience. What is a voluntary experience? Sometimes you might have had invaluable unpaid services like Ramadan, flood relief activities, fundraising for a cause, organizing meetings for a cause like AIDS awareness or polio eradication. Likewise, you can also include them, because all these things show that you are a dynamic individual and you are not free and lethargic. You do not waste your time, moreover you put your leisure for proper use. It shows how serious you are towards the society and your life. You might have won some awards and some honors. It is good to include them also, because they show that you are an exceptional individual. If you do not have one, do not worry, all your commitment shows what you are. Then professional affiliations. Being a student, you might have associated yourself with some organizations, let us say youth hostels or some NGOs, maybe campaigning against AIDS, maybe against child labor. You might have been a member of all those things. It is good to include them, but see that all those entries must be current, okay? Or you must be a member of a library for that matter. For example, I am a life member in ASRC. Today it is called Indo-American Center for International Studies and references. Actually, there is a dispute over references. In US, the practice is this: they do not give references. Instead, they say references are available on request. But in India, references are asked for. If they are asked for, it is good to give the list of 2-3 people who can vouch for your character. But before you give references, you take the consent of the people who can give their who can offer their referral. Okay. And while giving references, you have to mention their full name and then their status or their position, and if they are in some position in the society, you have to clearly mention that. And then you also have to give their address. Then comes personal information. What is the personal information? Maybe some details about your family, some details about your place and date of birth, and your marital status, your passport number, languages known, your interests, your hobbies, all these things. But here is a note for you, please. In the US, you know, asking for personal information is illegal. But in India, I think we need to mention all these details in our resume. It depends on the firm you are applying for, and you have to keep in mind. But do we have one and only format for a resume? No, not like that. We have various formats. We have chronological resume, you have functional resume, and you have third type, which includes both chronological and some aspects of functional resumes. You would like to have a look at these things? Come on, I will show you. Look at this chronological resume. One student prepared this resume. I hope you can have a look at this. Just a glance. We cannot show you for a long time. See, it runs just into one page. Then would like to have a look at functional resume. Please look at this. See, summary of qualifications, and then professional accomplishments, and maybe he was a manager, project manager for some time, and then his educational qualifications. And finally, see this note, references and work sample available upon request. This is the practice in the US. And finally, you want to have a glance at a combined resume, a combination of a functional and chronological resume. Look at this. First comes identification information and then objective. He does not mention career objective or job objective, simply says objective, and then summary of qualifications. Here he summarizes his qualifications not under a tabular form, but by bullets. You see, you can read out all these things. And then comes professional accomplishments, program or project manager, and finally work history. In other words, you can also say experience, then education likewise, and finally references and work sample available upon request. See the note, but in India the practice is this, we include references. If you are applying maybe to a firm in US, you need to be very careful because you have to keep this thing in mind. Then let us have a look at what is a chronological resume. In a chronological resume, of course, it is also self-explanatory. In a chronological resume, all entries are arranged in reverse chronological order as we discussed earlier. The latest comes first and it goes back likewise, and all entries go into it. There will not be any exception, and it is also a mostly preferred one because it is the traditional one, and it is very easy to form an opinion about the aspiring employee or the candidate. So, it is good to use chronological resume. I think it is good for all students. Then coming to functional resume. What is a functional resume? It is also self-explanatory. It is functional in its format. Usually people who have a lot of work history and who are changing their job from time to time, they can prefer this. If you do not have a stable history, then you prefer it, but students, you need not go for this one. It is good for people who have a lot of work experience. And then in a functional resume, entries are made on priority basis. All entries are prioritized. You want some clarification on that? For example, somewhere way back in 2005, you might have been in a job which is very challenging and which is very attractive and which impresses your prospective employer. Then it is good to make it a first entry. And then this type of resume, this functional resume, is prepared to suit the requirements of the job which you are aspiring for. What does it mean? Maybe you are applying for a bank manager, let us see, a private bank manager. If you are applying for this type of job, you know what should you do? You have to think about your past experience. If you had an experience in any organization as a manager, it comes first. Even some time ago, it comes first. That is it. Now, we shall move on to the combination resume, a resume, combined resume, and as it is self-explanatory, it is also a combination of both chronological and functional resumes, and some aspects of a chronological resume and some other aspects of a functional resume are included in this. Sometimes it takes a job objective. Of course, identifying information goes into it, into every resume. Besides, you mention your work history, your qualifications, but depending on the need, you explain them. And some tips to remember before we close. While preparing a resume, there are some do's and don'ts. Let us look at do's. Keep a soft copy of your resume because you need to update it from time to time. You cannot type your resume every time it is asked for. Keep a soft copy and immediately you can update it. And very important one, you have to customize your resume, you have to tailor your resume for every job advertisement, because Job objectives change, and work experience, the order of work experience, it also changes depending on the job you are applying for. One very important thing, sometimes students may try to include certain things which are very attractive and fancy for them, but keep in mind you have to include only facts. Do not try to bluff the employer by giving some false information, you may be caught hold of. And one more important thing is this, you need not give the heading resume, because anyone who looks at this document very well knows that it is a resume. Then why should we give the obvious one? No need, it becomes redundant. Some tips to remember, some don'ts. We may have a tendency of affixing our photo because you feel that you are very attractive and very handsome or beautiful. Do not do that, please. Do not affix your photo. And do not mention any information regarding your salary, expected salary. Some people think that we have to mention our salary. Do not do that, because if you mention a figure, the boss may misunderstand, because you may be asking more than what he expects. Sometimes you may be asking less than what he is going to give. That is why it is good to avoid. And then no need of including or attaching testimonials. Earlier we used to attach testimonials. If they are asked, okay, you can include. If they are not, do not include them, please. If you want to know more about resume writing, here I have some books, please. I also brought one book with me, students. You can have a look at this book. You see, this is the resume handbook. This is by Viva Books, prepared by Arthur D. Rosenberg and David Heiser, published by Adams Media Corporation, Massachusetts, USA. And here you have many entries and many sample resumes. You can read this book, you can have many tips, useful tips, and it is a good handbook. And there are other books, please. Strategic Resumes by Marcy Mahoney, Viva Books Private Limited, New Delhi. And the first book is 101 Great Resumes by Career Press Editors, Jayco Publishing House, Mumbai. And I also have some websites for you, please. If you are interested in your libraries, I think they are available free of cost. You can go and browse through. The first one is www.rockportinstitute.com/resumes.html, and then www.bestresumewriting.com. And likewise you have innumerable websites, and the best one is naukri.com, where you can customize your own resume. You will have a template, just you fill in your information and they prepare a resume for you. And then monsterindia.com, it is also a job search engine, and if you want to search for jobs, you can search through these sites. Before we wrap up, I would like to have a recapitulation. What is a resume? Try to recollect. The Macmillan English Dictionary defines it as a summary. It is a summary of your qualifications, your education, your skills, and what else you have to offer to your prospective employer. What does it do for you? It fetches an interview for you, simply. And what else? It also prepares you to set a goal for your future. It helps you assess your own life, your own future, your own career. And then we also discussed format and content. What is the format? What type of paper should we take? A4 size white paper. And then our resume must be confined to one page. And then what else? All entries you have to maintain certain typographical regulations, like first letter of every subheading must be capital. And then coming to content, language must be very formal. Do not make it very informal by making some slang, using some slang expressions or some colloquial expressions. Do not do that, please. Let the language be very formal. And then You have various entries, please. Depending on your resume, if you want to write a chronological resume, you need to include certain things. If you want to write a functional resume, you have some other entries, and if you want to write a combination of both the things, both functional and chronological resumes, you have to include certain other things. That is why you have to keep all these things in mind while preparing your resume, your format and your content. You see, good impressions or first impressions or the best impressions. Of course, at the same time, content is also very, very important, because you cannot cheat your employer just by appearance. Then coming to how to write a resume. In the beginning, people do have problem of writing how to start, but don't get intimidated. You collect your information, you gather your information, and you jot down all that information and organize the information into a proper order. And what are the entries? Here you have another, again the same list, not another, same list. Identifying information, career objective, or simply say objective. It is good to say objective. And then education, and then your experience. If you have any other qualifications, you can say other qualifications or skills, and then voluntary experience, and then professional affiliations, awards and honors, references, and then personal information. I told you earlier that in the US, asking for personal information is illegal to any employer. That is why it is good to avoid, but you know, there is a subtle way of expressing your personal information, that is by showing that you are associated with certain organizations. You can say that you belong to certain backgrounds. Okay, it goes without saying. And what are the other types of resumes? Can you say chronological resume, functional resume, and then combination of both the things combined one. Dear friends, keep all these things in your mind and pay utmost attention while preparing your resume. Take the advice of your lecturers and some experts, so that you cannot commit any mistakes, either typographical or some expressions. So, I request all of you to pay utmost attention while preparing your resume, and finally, I would like to wish you all the best in preparing your resumes and success in your lives. Thank you.